Enbridge is proposing to build two pipelines from the tar sands all the way just over 730 miles or over 1,100 kilometers to the coast of British Columbia at a place called Kitimat. And that's where they will load this tar sands oil onto super tankers, and super tankers will navigate these waters for the first time ever. There currently are no oil tankers on that part of the coast. And the big economic push for this is to try to diversify markets away from just relying on the US and trying to access Asian markets for the tar sands.
It's a 1,100 kilometer long pipeline crossing over 750 streams and rivers along the way, including the Fraser River and the Skeena River and many tributaries of it. You know, it's a $5.5 billion pipeline, but there's like 174 billion barrels of oil in the oil sands. You know, at $100 a barrel, that's a lot of money.
They're trying to build a pipeline through one of the most technologically difficult landscapes on Earth, prone to landslides and avalanches. They've never built a pipeline through an area like this before. And this is really an experiment to see if they can do it. When you talk to them, they have every answer. But if they can't even control spills in a flat area like Michigan or Alberta, how are they going to be able to deal with all these issues in a very, very mountainous, weather adverse area with high snow packs and difficult access?
You know, people know what's at risk. It's the rivers. You know, you get the headwaters of the Bulkley, which is the Maurice River. You have the Copper Chlor system, the Core River, which runs into the Copper River. You have the Hunter, which flows into the Upper Kitimat and down into Kitimat.
One oil spill into the Kitimat River, and the town of Kitimat is out of fresh water, as they get their water right from the Kitimat River. Without water, there's not much left to argue about.
I need gas. I operate a jet boat. I drive a car. But this oil is dirty oil.
Not only floats along the surface of the river if there's a spill, but it also sinks. It's very heavy oil, and it sinks and gets into the substrate.
It would just devastate the bug life and the plant life along the river. And it would do so for a lot of time because you can't clean up 1 billion rocks.
And then what do you do with the oil? Now you're in this awful decision making of like, what do you do with this logjam, which is critical salmon habitat for the rearing of juveniles? Do you remove it, or do you just let the oil sit there and slowly release its toxins? You're gonna have to reconstruct a river.
I don't think I'm an environmentalist or what you call a tree hugger, because I've done it all. You know, I've been involved in it, but what I see is destruction, and so fast it's not good. And they talk about jobs, but as far as I'm concerned, I think we're losing a lot of our jobs by getting rid of all our raw resources, like our logs and this oil. You know, as far as I'm concerned, if they want to ship that oil, it should be refined right there at Fort McMurray. They've polluted that country bad enough as it is. They should refine it right there.
In this case, they're not going to do anything with it. Like, they're not going to upgrade it in Canada. They're not going to refine it in Canada. They're going to put it in a pipeline and ship it to upgraders and refineries overseas. And that's a real big concern because, well, one, it's there. You know, if you're into jobs and you're a union guy in Alberta, you're exporting jobs.
It seems a bit strange that we have one of the largest oil reserves in the world, and yet we're importing half of our energy from unstable states around the world.
So in the last 4 or 5 years, Chinese national state oil companies, these are companies that are governed by the Communist Party of China, have bought nearly $20 billion worth of bitumen projects. To make these purchases easier, the Canadian government has incredibly signed an investment deal with China that was inked in Russia, no less, that effectively give Chinese state-owned companies incredible power and say over the scale and pace of resource development in this country. In other words, if the government of British Columbia were to say no to the Enbridge project, A company like Sinopec, which is invested in the pipeline, could then sue the British Columbia government for compensation. That's ridiculous. It's just wrong.
What we have is an increasingly Chinese-owned industry, and they're proposing to have Chinese companies build the pipeline to send the oil to China, where it will be value added by Chinese workers. Whose economy are we building?
Just the other day, we had a 7.7 earthquake hit Hawaii, and it was felt all the way inland. You know, we've always known that we're going to have earthquakes happening on the coast. Vancouver keeps waiting for the big one, and yet, you know, we want to now introduce oil super tankers into this coast where there was just a tsunami warning for a number of hours. I don't think so. We're dealing with a company that regularly spills oil, and they have, at least for the last number of years, had about 100 oil spills a year. And what really brought home the potential risk to our wild salmon watersheds was when Enbridge had their massive spill in the Kalamazoo River in Michigan, and they spilled over 3 million liters.
They got 911 calls. You know, the 911 got calls all through the night from local residents saying they smelled gas. What they were smelling was the benzene from the condensate. The gas companies went out there to check out the gas pipelines. No problem. It was only till the morning where a farmer found, you know, oil seeping out of his land into a ditch and then into a creek and into a river that it was finally stopped.
It costs 5 times more to clean up than a light oil spill. And the reason for that is that so much of that bitumen sank into the Kalamazoo River over a 32-mile area and was incredibly expensive to clean up. The cost of cleaning up that spill of 20,000 barrels was $800 million. That's nearly $1 billion.
If you can't clean it up in Kalamazoo, don't tell me you can do it here. Sorry.
Cool. All right.
Nobody believes that shit.
I think when you mess with your salmon, it's like messing with a mama bear with cubs. You better be prepared to have your face ripped off.
The Skeena is really the test bed of sustainability, of whether the human community and the salmon community can find some peace. It also is home to an iconic species of fish that are increasingly valuable to a lot of different people, steelhead.
Thousands of people travel to British Columbia to fish for steelhead. If it was gone, they really don't have anywhere else to go.
This is the jewel. It's the Valhalla, the Nirvana for steelheading for sure.
You look at the names of our hockey teams. I mean, the Smithers hockey team is called the Steelheads. You go to Terrace, and it's the River Kings. It's no fluke that these hockey teams are named after things that are iconic to us.
We have a government, a conservative government in Canada, that's convened the process, but then at the same time has described people who oppose the project as enemies of the state.
How could we be extremists? We've never said one word that would label us extremists. We've never ever condoned violence. We've never ever condoned ruining or wrecking private property or injuring a person.
Well, just as a result of the Harper government, and which includes Joe Oliver and his letter calling people radicals and against everything, and really putting a chilling climate on charities in Canada. So they put forward over $8 million in the budget to audit charities. We were on our 4th one when they passed this.
It makes me feel ashamed as a Canadian
it makes me feel ashamed as a British Columbian that my own provincial government is complicit in this as well.
And this is the kind of behavior one associates with petrostates. So you have a country that becomes dependent on the export of one resource. They neglect the rest of the economy, and the whole politics of the country becomes subservient to the plantation economy of exporting oil. And in the process, you will brand your own people, your own citizens, as enemies of the state when they are raising legitimate, serious, moral questions about the pace and scale of development and what is being sacrificed in the name of hydrocarbon development.
What they don't ask is what is in the public interest. What about the people that know these places, that make up these towns, that make up the fabric of our country? What about those people? What about their interests? What about their concerns for how they want to leave this place for their children?
The Tsimshian people look 7 generations ahead, so as I stand here today, I'm not talking about me right now, I'm talking about the future children and the fact that we all need a home. You do not have my permission to put a pipeline through Tsimshian territory.
These rivers these areas are bank to people who sustain themselves from it. If you have a bank account and you keep taking and taking and taking, eventually you go broke. And I think that's where governments and industry are taking us. There's going to come a point, some point where there's nothing left in the bank. What do we do then? Where do we turn?
4,000 people have signed up to provide testimony to the panel that makes the decision on this project. And the vast majority of them are in opposition to this project. And this is a record number of people that have ever registered to comment on any environmental project in the history of Canada.
Just because there is a contradiction between the fact that we need to reduce our use of fossil fuels because of the impacts that has, on our home, and the fact that we still use fossil fuels doesn't deny the fact that we have to reduce that use.
Will our salmon go the way of the buffalo? Something to think about. I just have to feel optimistic, hopeful, get ready to go to camp, and enjoy it as much as you can while it lasts. While it lasts. I've tried to tell my people that. Enjoy it while it lasts. Make use of it. Take pictures of it. Document it. Make markings of it. Maps of it. You have to prove that at one time you did have a good life, a good living. And there was a great natural world there. Okay. Now, sometimes you make me sad.
Thank you.